At my dad's funeral, my brother mocked me, saying, "She's just here for the money." Then the lawyer arrived, and Dad's shocking video made him pale. My name is Emma Williams, and at 32 years old, I never envisioned myself standing alone at my father's burial, my relatives whispering about me from across the room. My brother Lucas approached me with a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's only here for the money. Dad is going to cut her off." Their laughter pierced me like glass, but nothing prepared me for what came next. The lawyer arrived with a USB disc, and my father's face showed on the screen. Before I tell you what he said, where are you viewing from? Hit the subscribe button and leave a comment below. You won't believe how my family's arrogant expressions altered after hearing my father's final remarks. Growing up, I loved my bond with my father, William Roberts. Dad was a successful real estate developer in Boston who started his firm from the bottom up after inheriting his father's tiny construction business. Dad worked hard, often too hard, but Dad always had time for me when I was a child. I recall our fishing vacations to Cape Cod when I was around 9 years old. Dad would wake me up before daylight, and we'd load the truck with our gear. "Emma," he'd continue, using his particular nickname for me, "the early bird catches the fish." During those calm mornings on the river, he taught me about patience and endurance. Those were the moments when I felt most connected to him. The corporate world operates in the same manner as fishing. He once told me, "You need to know where to look, when to wait, and when to reel in your opportunity." Even as a child, I could see how much the family business meant to him. It was his legacy, his life's work. My brother Lucas was 4 years older than me, and from my earliest memories, he was always competing for Dad's approval. When I caught my first fish, Lucas had to catch 2. When I earned an A on a test, Lucas had to get an A++. Dad never appeared to notice this unhealthy competitiveness, or if he did, he never addressed it. In his opinion, a little sibling rivalry was probably healthy. "Your brother has a natural head for business," Dad would say whenever Lucas showed interest in real estate or brought up the company at dinner. The pride in his voice was unmistakable. "He'll take his properties to new heights someday." The expectation was clear from an early age. Both Lucas and I would eventually join the family business. We were both going to Harvard University for business degrees, and I was going to handle client relations and marketing, while Lucas would focus on operations and development. However, art had always been a passion of mine, and my elementary school teachers praised my drawings. In high school, I won a number of regional competitions. While Lucas was reading business magazines and accompanying Dad to building sites, I was filling sketchbooks and experimenting with various painting methods. My first significant disagreement with my father occurred in my senior year of high school. When I received my college acceptance letters, I picked Pratt Institute over Harvard. My father couldn't comprehend my decision. "Art is a hobby, Emma, not a job," he said during a furious dispute in his home office. "The family business is your future. It's about security. We've been planning this for years." "That's what you've been planning," I said. I never agreed to it. That night marked a turning point in our family dynamic. Lucas, ever the opportunist, positioned himself as the loyal child, the one who wouldn't disappoint our father. "Don't worry, Dad," he said at dinner while I sat in silence. "I'll make sure his properties thrive for another generation." Dad began to grow distant after that, and our fishing trips ceased. He still paid for my education, which I was extremely grateful for, but our relationship had fundamentally changed. He attended my first college art exhibition, and I saw a glimpse of pride in his eyes when he saw my work, but these moments became increasingly rare. Lucas used subtle but effective manipulation to control the narrative about me to the rest of the family, including our Uncle Thomas and Aunt Lillian, cousins and Dad's business associates. I became the ungrateful daughter who rejected her father's legacy, and Lucas made sure everyone knew how much this betrayal had hurt Dad. "She doesn't even call him anymore." I overheard Lucas telling Uncle Thomas at a family Christmas gathering during my sophomore year that I had called the week before but Dad hadn't picked up. When I confronted Lucas later, he just shrugged. "I'm just telling it like it is, sis. You made your decision." By the time I graduated from art school, the narrative had been firmly established. Lucas was the devoted son who would carry on the Roberts legacy, and I was the daughter who turned her back on the family. The worst part was that I could see Dad beginning to believe it as well. My college years were a blur of art studios, exhibitions, and part-time jobs. Despite the growing distance between us, I made efforts to maintain my relationship with Dad. I'd send him photographs of my artwork, hoping to show him that my choice wasn't a rejection of him, but rather a pursuit of my own passion. During my junior year, I created a series of abstract paintings inspired by the Boston skyline, which I thought of as Dad's skyline, because many of those buildings contained his properties. I was thrilled when a local gallery chose the series for exhibition, and I sent Dad an invitation, hoping that seeing my success would help bridge our gap. "I'd love for you to come," I said during our phone call. "The opening is on Friday at 8 p.m. "I'll check my calendar," he replied, his voice carrying that formal tone he'd adopted with me. Lucas and I might be closing on the Sunset Ridge property that day. I tried not to show my disappointment. "Well, the exhibition runs for 3 weeks, so maybe another day would work." "Maybe," he said. "I'll let you know." To my surprise, Dad did show up, not on opening night, but the following Tuesday. He arrived alone without telling me he was coming, and the gallery owner recognized him from the photo I kept on display and called me over. "Your work is interesting," Dad observed, scrutinizing my largest piece. There was something in his voice that I couldn't quite decipher. "You're clearly talented." It wasn't the passionate approbation I'd hoped for, but it was something. After that we drank coffee, and it nearly seemed like old times for a little hour. As we parted, he awkwardly patted my shoulder and said, "I'm proud of you for working hard, Emma, even if it's not what I would have chosen." He asked about my classes and my plans after graduation, and I asked about the business and his health. We avoided any contentious topics, and that moment gave me hope that he might eventually accept my path. Years later, after graduating, I moved to New York to pursue my art career, and the distance made communication with Dad even more difficult. At the time, I had no idea that Lucas was working hard to prevent that from happening, and it was only later that I realized the extent of his sabotage. I'd call on holidays and birthdays, but our conversations remained stilted. Lucas, on the other hand, had fully integrated himself into Robert's properties. According to family updates, he was Dad's right-hand man, involved in every major decision. During one Thanksgiving visit back to Boston, I noticed Dad looking tired. The lines around his eyes had deepened, and he seemed to move more slowly. "Are you feeling okay?" I asked him privately. "Just getting old," he dismissed with a wave of his hand. "Doctor says I need to watch my blood pressure, that's all." Aunt Lillian later told me that Dad had a minor heart scare earlier that year. "Lucas has been such a rock," she told me, "taking on extra work so your father can rest more." The implication was clear. While I was off pursuing my selfish dreams, Lucas was selflessly supporting Dad. What Aunt Lillian didn't know, and none of us did, was that Lucas's support included filtering Dad's communications. As Dad's health deteriorated, Lucas's methods became more direct. I sent birthday cards that mysteriously never arrived, I left voicemails that were never returned, and I extended invitations to my New York exhibitions that were somehow lost. During my brief visits home, he would set up situations that reinforced his narrative about me. He'd schedule important business meetings on days I was visiting, then act disappointed when Dad chose work over spending time with me. "That's just how it is when you run a business, Emma," Lucas would say with fake sympathy. "Some of us have responsibilities we can't ignore." 6 months before Dad died, I made one final attempt at reconciliation. My work had been featured in a prestigious Manhattan gallery, and a prominent art critic had praised my innovative vision. I called Dad, excited to share the news, but the call went horribly. Dad appeared distant, almost cold, and when I told him about the exhibition, he barely acknowledged it. "That's nice," he said flatly. I tried to express genuine happiness for the company's success, but Dad cut me off. "Look, Emma, I'm very busy right now. Robert's Properties requires my full attention. Not everyone has the luxury of pursuing hobbies." His dismissal of my career as a hobby stung. Despite years of hard work and legitimate accomplishments, he still couldn't see value in my path. When I tried to explain how important art was to me, how it wasn't just a hobby, but my profession, he sighed heavily. "I'm too tired for this conversation. Maybe we should talk another time." We never did. That was our last real conversation. I hung up, convinced that our relationship would never be repaired, that he would always see me as the daughter who disappointed him, the daughter who wasn't worth his time. I had no idea that every word of that conversation had been calculated not by my father, but by Lucas, who had been poisoning our relationship for years. And I had no clue that Dad had uncovered the truth. It was too late for us to reconcile in person, but not too late for him to make things right. I was in my New York apartment, ready for a meeting with a gallery owner, when I got the call. It wasn't from Lucas or any immediate family member, but from Charles Griffin, Dad's longtime friend and attorney. "Emma," Charles said, his voice grave, "I'm sorry to inform you that your father suffered a major heart attack last night." My hand gripped the phone tightly. "Is he okay?" The silence that followed told me everything before Charles even spoke. "I'm so sorry, Emma. Lucas asked me to notify you." Lucas asked Charles to call me, And my own brother couldn't even pick up the phone to tell me our father had died. I sat hard on my couch, the room spinning around me, and I managed to ask when it happened. It happened around 2 a.m., and he was at home when the housekeeper arrived this morning. I booked the first train to Boston, throwing clothes into a suitcase with shaking hands. During the journey, I called Lucas several times, but he didn't answer until my fourth attempt. "What is it, Emma?" "I'm dealing with a lot right now," he snapped when he finally picked up. "I'm on my way to Boston," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Charles told me about Dad." "Why didn't you contact me yourself?" "I've been busy making plans," he said coldly. "Someone had to step up, and I would have helped if you'd phoned me straight immediately." Lucas sneered. "Straight? You've been so interested in Dad's life lately." Before I could react, he said, "Look, the funeral is scheduled for Friday at St. Mark's. Dad's corpse is already at the funeral home. Everything's taken care of. Friday is just 3 days away. Shouldn't we wait so people have time to—" "The preparations have been made, Emma? Dad and I discussed his desires years ago, not that you would know anything about it." Every conversation with Lucas felt like navigating a minefield. I took a deep breath. "Where should I stay? Is the house—" "The house is full with Uncle Thomas and Aunt Lillian staying there. You should book a hotel." He paused. "Emma, there's a family gathering tomorrow night before the funeral. Immediate family only." The implication was clear. I wasn't welcome. When I arrived in Boston, I went straight to the funeral home. I needed to see Dad to say goodbye in my own way. The funeral director led me to a private viewing room where Dad lay in an expensive casket, looking unnervingly peaceful in his best suit. "Hi, Dad," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry we didn't fix things." I stood there for nearly an hour talking to him quietly, telling him about my life in New York, all the things I would have shared if we hadn't let things fall apart. "That's terrible," Megan replied. "Do you want me to come up for the funeral? You shouldn't have to go through this alone." Her offer of support meant everything to me. Megan and I arrived at St. Mark's 30 minutes early, but the front pews were already full of family and business associates. She promised that I'd be on the first train tomorrow and we'd get through it together. Lucas, seated in the front row with Uncle Thomas and Aunt Lillian, didn't even look up when I entered. We found seats near the middle of the church, and as more people arrived, I felt their stares and heard their whispers. The narrative Lucas had created followed me like a shadow: the ungrateful daughter, the family disappointment, appearing only now that there might be an inheritance to claim. The funeral itself was exquisite and dignified, much like my father. The priest spoke about Dad's business successes, community efforts, and committed parenting, focusing on Lucas at the end. When it came time for the eulogy, Lucas approached the podium with the confident stride of someone who belongs there. His speech painted a picture of a father-son relationship that seemed almost fictional to me. Weekend fishing trips that continued into adulthood, late-night discussions about business strategy, and Dad proudly watching Lucas carry on the family tradition. "My father often said that family was everything to him," Lucas said, his voice thick with practiced emotion. "He believed in loyalty, in showing up for the people you love, in honoring your commitments, and everyone in that church knew he was contrasting his dedication with my supposed abandonment. Some people," Lucas continued, glancing at me, "choose to abandon their responsibilities, their family legacy. But Dad and I always understood the importance of staying true to your roots." So I felt Megan's hand tighten around mine as I struggled to maintain my composure. After the service, people gathered in the church hall for the reception. Several of Dad's business associates approached to offer condolences, but most interactions were brief and awkward, and Lillian hugged me stiffly before quickly moving on to speak with other guests. I was pouring myself a cup of coffee when "Are you enjoying yourself?" he inquired, his voice quiet but clear enough for neighboring visitors to hear. "It must be lovely to arrive home after years away and be greeted like family." "Lucas, this is not the time or place," I said, attempting to maintain my voice. "We're here to commemorate Dad." Lucas laughed sharply and bitterly. "Is that why you're here? Because from where I'm standing, it appears that you're just here for the money. Dad's going to cut you off, you know." Several heads turned at his raised voice, and I felt my face burn with humiliation. "You have no idea why I'm here," I said. "You haven't cared about this family for years. You didn't care when Dad needed heart medication. You didn't care when he was working himself to death to keep the company going. You only care now that there might be something in it for you." People were staring openly. I heard someone snigger and Uncle Thomas came, resting a hand on Lucas's shoulder. Perhaps Emma should just leave, he urged, without even addressing me directly. She's not really family anymore, is she? The laughing that followed from numerous family members nearly shattered me. I considered leaving, sparing myself further humiliation, but something kept me rooted to the spot. I owed it to Dad to see this through despite everything. I'm staying, I said quietly. Whether you like it or not, he was my father too. Lucas shrugged dramatically. Suit yourself, but don't get your hopes up for tomorrow. Dad knew who truly cared about him in the end. The will reading is tomorrow. I hadn't even been thinking about the inheritance, but clearly everyone else had, and that was the only reason they thought I'd come back to claim what they thought I didn't deserve. As I walked away, I heard Lucas's voice carry across the room, and she'll be singing a different tune tomorrow when she realizes Dad saw through her act years before. If only I had realized then how prophetic those remarks would be, but not in the manner Lucas intended. The reception proceeded like a slow-motion nightmare, with people I'd known all my life either avoiding me totally or approaching with thinly veiled animosity. My father's business partner of 20 years, David Collins, spoke to me with such forced politeness that it was almost worse than outright rudeness. Your father was a remarkable man, David remarked, peeking over my shoulder many times as if seeking escape. No one expected me to play any role in Robert's properties, but he built quite a legacy with Lucas. Right now the company is in good hands, he continued, finally meeting my eyes. Your brother has your father's vision, and the transition should be seamless. My cousin Sophia, who had been my childhood playmate, was speaking with a group near the refreshment table when I approached. She whispered something to the others before reluctantly breaking away to greet me. Emma, she said, her hug so brief that it barely qualified as physical contact. I'm sorry about Uncle William. Thank you, I said. How are you doing? It's been a while. Okay. She glanced back to her friends. Lucas stated you're currently residing in New York. That must be fascinating. It is. I've been pursuing a profession as an artist. I actually have a gallery show next month that— Oh, that's nice, Sophia interrupted, clearly uninterested. Must be fun to follow your dreams while Lucas has been here handling everything. She didn't even try to hide her judgment. Excuse me, I should check on my husband. Before I could respond, she was gone and I stood alone again, feeling increasingly like an unwelcome intruder at my own father's funeral. I found Megan by the windows, thankfully alone. This is worse than I expected, I whispered to her. They all hate me. They don't know you, Megan replied firmly. They only know the story Lucas has been telling them, which they all believe because it's easier than questioning it. Look, you're here for your father, not for them. Just get through today, and they will read tomorrow. Then we can return to New York. My stomach tightened at the thought of the will reading. If the funeral was this bad, how much worse would tomorrow be? Based on Lucas's confidence, I fully expected to be publicly disinherited, confirming Dad's disappointment in me. I was lost in these thoughts when I heard Lucas's voice. I still can't believe she had the nerve to show up today, he was saying to Uncle Thomas and two men I recognized as board members of Robert's properties, after how she broke Dad's heart by refusing to even visit him when he was sick. I felt a flash of indignation because I hadn't known Dad was seriously ill. No one had told me. But before I could decide whether to approach him, Lucas added, Well, she's in for a surprise tomorrow, he said with a chuckle. Dad amended his will last year when she refused to come home for his birthday, and he finally understood she didn't deserve anything from what he created. One of the board members spotted me standing close and pushed Lucas, who turned with fake surprise. Oh, Emma, didn't see you there, he replied, not even seeming to be real. We were just discussing tomorrow's appointment with the lawyer. You are intending to attend, right? His tone conveyed that he expected, even hoped, that I would flee to avoid the public disgrace he predicted for me. Of course I'll be there, I said, attempting to keep my voice steady. Lucas grinned coldly. Excellent. Uncle Thomas didn't even try to disguise his displeasure. I don't know why you're bothering Emma. While he was alive, William expressed his thoughts unequivocally. Did he? I asked, suddenly wondering if I'd missed something important. What precisely did he say? That's between him and the family members who actually stayed in touch, Thomas said. Maybe if you'd picked up the phone more often in the last few years, you'd know. I felt my cheeks flush with rage and embarrassment, and I attempted to keep in touch. It's not as simple as you're making it seem. Never with you, is it? Lucas interjected. There's always an excuse. It's always someone else's fault. Dad grew bored of it, Emma. He became tired of waiting for you to mature and accept your responsibilities. Several surrounding groups had gone silent, openly observing our conflict. I felt dozens of eyes on me, judging and condemning. "You have no idea what my relationship with Dad was like," I murmured, my voice shaking. "And you have no right to." "I have every right," Lucas said. "I was there every day through everything. While you were out in New York as an artist, I was running his firm, driving him to doctor's appointments, and being his daughter." "Sorry, I meant the real child." "Should be." My humiliation was total. I stood there holding back tears as Lucas smiled triumphantly. "Face it, Emma. You're only here for the money. Dad is going to cut you off. Everyone here is aware of this, you already know it. Tomorrow, we'll just make it official." I wanted to flee. Every instinct screamed at me to flee this horrible place, these horrible people who had accepted Lucas's version of reality without question. But leaving would only confirm their beliefs about me. Despite the burning humiliation, despite the tears I could barely hold back, I stood my ground. "I guess we'll find out tomorrow, won't we?" I managed to utter before walking away with all the dignity I could summon. Megan saw me in the church's little garden, and I finally allowed myself to cry. "Those people are poisonous," she murmured, sitting next to me. "Lucas has them all utterly deceived." "Maybe he's right," I whispered, doubt creeping in. "Perhaps I should have tried more with Dad. Perhaps I don't deserve anything." "That's ludicrous," Megan firmly stated. "Your brother is manipulative and harsh, and no matter what happens tomorrow with the will, you know your value. Emma, your value is not defined by your father's money." She was correct, of course, but as we left the reception, I couldn't help but believe that tomorrow's will reading would be the final word on my relationship with my father, a public affirmation of his disdain in me. Megan had offered to accompany me to the will reading, but I declined because this was something I needed to face alone. The next morning dawned with the same gray skies that had hung over the funeral. I dressed carefully in a simple black dress, trying to mentally prepare myself for what was to come. "Call me the second it's over," she insisted as I left the hotel. No matter what happens, I promised I would, though I expected to be making that call in tears. The law offices of Jenkins, Baxter & Wright occupied the top floor of one of Dad's downtown properties, which felt like salt in the wound as I rode the elevator up. Charles Griffin, Dad's friend and attorney, had been handling the family's legal affairs for over 30 years, and he would be the one to deliver what I assumed would be my final disappointment from my father. When I arrived, the conference room was already full of family members and key business associates, and Lucas sat at the head of the table, establishing himself as the new patriarch of the Roberts family. Uncle Thomas and Aunt Lillian sat to his right, with the company's CFO and 2 board members adjacent, and they were all engaged in comfortable conversation, almost celebratory. When I entered, the chatter died down, and Lucas looked up with a mock surprise. "Emma, you actually came." He motioned to an empty chair at the far end of the table and said, "We saved you a seat." The seating arrangement was not subtle, with me at the foot of the table while Lucas controlled the head position. I took my allotted seat without remark, ignoring the murmurs and stares. "I was just telling everyone about the Broadway Avenue project," Lucas explained, "which Dad and I worked on in his final months. It's going to alter that whole area." The message was apparent. This was a family business talk that didn't interest me, so I kept mute, counting the minutes until this torment was over. Charles Griffin entered the conference room at precisely 9:30 a.m., and unlike the others, he greeted me with real warmth. "Emma, thank you for coming," he began softly, squeezing my shoulder before taking his seat in the center of the table. "I'm very sorry about your father. He mentioned you frequently." This simple compassion almost crushed my spirit. I nodded graciously, not trusting myself to speak. Charles set his bag on the table and addressed the audience. "Before we begin, I'd want to thank you all for attending today. William Roberts was not just my customer, but also a close friend for almost 3 decades. Everyone in this room feels his loss terribly," Charles continued to murmurs of agreement. "You're all aware of William's diligent preparation. He provided extremely clear instructions regarding how today should occur." Lucas moved forward, his attitude assured. "We're all anxious to obey Dad's desires and carry out the transition he planned." Charles nodded, but his demeanor remained neutral. William's instructions for this reading are quite unusual. He prepared a video statement to accompany the formal will document. This revelation was received with puzzled stares. Video wills were not uncommon, but they were also not usual practice, especially for someone as conservative as my father. "A video?" Lucas inquired, a flicker of doubt crossing his features for the first time. "He never mentioned anything to me." "William recorded it privately about 3 months ago," Charles continued. He was very specific that it should be viewed before the written provisions are discussed. I carefully observed Lucas's reaction. "Well, let's get on with it then," Lucas said with forced casualness. I'm sure Dad just wanted to add a personal touch to his formal wishes. He recovered quickly, but I noticed a moment of genuine surprise, possibly even concern. Charles nodded to his assistant, who had entered with a laptop and projector. "We'll display the video on the screen at the end of the table." As the equipment was set up, the atmosphere in the room shifted. What had felt like a formality, a public confirmation of decisions already made, now held an element of unpredictability. I noticed Lucas whispering intensely to Uncle Thomas, whose expression grew increasingly concerned. "William was very explicit that everyone listed in the will be present for this video," Charles said, consulting a paper from his briefcase. "Let me confirm attendance." He read through a list of names, checking off each person as they acknowledged their presence, and then nodded satisfactorily. "Excellent, we're all here." He turned to his assistant. "We're ready to begin." The lights dimmed slightly, and Charles Griffin inserted a USB drive into the laptop. After a moment of technical adjustments, the projector illuminated the screen, and there was my father. The sight of him, healthy, composed, alive, hit me like a physical blow. He sat at his desk in the home office, wearing the navy blue suit he saved for important meetings. His silver hair was neatly combed, his expression was serious, but calm, and he looked directly into the camera, creating the unsettling illusion that he was looking at each of us in the room. The conference room fell completely silent, and Lucas appeared to be stunned by our father's posthumous appearance. "Hello everyone," Dad said, his voice so familiar that it made my throat clench with pain. "If you're seeing this, I'm no longer with you." I requested Charles to share this message because certain facts need to be addressed. Truths I sadly didn't realize until it was almost too late. He stopped, appearing to collect his thoughts. I looked around the table and realized that everyone was leaning forward slightly, depending on my father's every word. "What I'm about to say will surprise many of you, and it will upset some of you," Dad said. "But before I leave this world, I need to put the record straight." I had a peculiar sense in my chest, not exactly hope, but something close. My father's countenance softened, and I saw a glimpse of the Dad I remembered from those early fishing trips. The Dad who had loved me unconditionally before everything changed. "This is primarily a message about truth," he said. "About family, about betrayal and forgiveness." His eyes seemed to look directly at me, about second chances that come too late, but may not be too late to make things right. As my father began speaking, I realized that no matter what I had expected from today's proceedings, I had been entirely unprepared for what was about to happen. "I want to begin by speaking directly to my daughter Emma," Dad said, his eyes appearing to locate mine through the screen. "If you're here, and I sincerely hope you are, I have something I should have told you in person." Lucas squirmed uneasily in his chair. "I'm sorry for the distance that grew between us." A collective murmur swept through the crowd. "I apologize for not supporting your dreams. Most importantly, I apologize for accepting lies about you that I should have questioned." Dad's countenance darkened. "You know, I just found something that has altered everything I thought I understood about our family dynamic over the last few years. About 6 months ago, I experienced another mild heart attack. The doctors advised me to reduce my workload, so I started working from home more frequently." He leaned forward slightly. "One afternoon, while looking for some paperwork in Lucas's office at the home, I discovered something unpleasant. A drawer filled with cards and letters. 'For you, Emma.'" I gasped out, and heads turned to me before swiveling to Lucas, who had become extremely motionless. "Birthday cards I purportedly never got," Dad said. "Invitations to your art displays, messages informing me on your life. All unopened and stored away." His voice sharpened. "All purposefully kept from me." Lucas rose abruptly. "This is crazy." Dad was perplexed about his heart. "Mr. Roberts, please sit down," Charles interjected firmly. "Your father's orders were clear. The video must be watched in its full, without interruption." Lucas slid back into his chair, his cheeks flushed. On screen, Dad continued. "That revelation prompted me to conduct more research. I hired a private investigator without Lucas' knowledge to check into additional anomalies that I had seen. What I discovered was deeply troubling." Dad took a folder from his desk. The investigator discovered that Lucas had been intercepting Emma's phone calls to the house and the office. He had been deleting her voicemails, answering her calls when he knew she wouldn't answer, and then informing me that she was unreachable. He'd been aggressively obstructing any attempt at reconciliation between us. The conference room had become dead silent. The investigation revealed something even more disturbing about the business, Dad added sadly, causing tears to pour down my cheeks as I struggled to comprehend the gravity of what I was hearing. Lucas had been participating in unethical actions that contradicted everything Roberts Properties stood for. He'd been cutting corners on building materials, falsifying inspection reports, and in one case, bribing a city official to expedite permits. There was a gasp. The board members exchanged alarming glances. "I built this company on integrity," Dad explained, his voice rising with intensity. "My father taught me that our name meant something, that a Roberts property was built to last, built with pride and honesty. Lucas betrayed those values for profit and expediency." Lucas was now clearly sweating. His previous confidence had entirely dissipated. "This is a misunderstanding," he said to no one in particular. "Mr. Roberts, please," Charles warned. "Please." On screen. Dad's countenance softened again. "Emma, when I discovered all this, my first instinct was to call you immediately. But I realized something important. You shouldn't have to hear my apology over the phone. You deserved better than that. I made arrangements to come to New York to see your life there, to meet you on your terms." My jaw clenched with pain. "But you never came," I murmured. Dad continued, as if he had heard me. "I had planned to see you the week following that final call, which wasn't what you expected. I was aloof because I was angry, not at you, but at Lucas and myself for being so blind for so long. I was intending to surprise you in New York, to visit your exhibition, to finally tell you in person how proud I am of you." Dad paused, emotion overpowering him. My heart had other ideas, it seemed. "So, this video will have to suffice as the apology and recognition you deserve." He took out another folder. "I've been following your career, Emma, not through Lucas's filtered updates but through art magazines and gallery websites. I've seen your reviews and exhibitions, and I've even bought several of your pieces through an intermediary." This admission astounded me entirely. Dad had bought my artwork and provided anonymous assistance for my career. Your creativity, your vision, your determination to follow your own path. These are qualities to be admired, not condemned. I was wrong to try to force you into a mold that didn't fit. You aren't just a talented artist, Emma. You're a businesswoman in your own right, creating something from nothing, just like I did when I was younger." Dad straightened in his chair, his attitude growing more professional. "Now to the matter of my will and the future of his properties." Lucas leaned forward again, stress visible in every line of his body. "Given what I've discovered about Lucas's business practices and his deliberate deception regarding Emma, I cannot in good conscience leave the company solely in his hands. My original will, drafted 5 years ago, would have made Lucas the primary inheritor of both my personal estate and his properties with a small trust established for Emma." Lucas nodded slightly, as if to corroborate what he had been telling everyone. "That will has been revoked," Dad said firmly. "In its place, I have established the following provisions." The chamber came to a halt. I could almost hear hearts pounding in the quiet. "To my son Lucas Roberts, I leave a cash inheritance of $600,000 to be held in trust and distributed in annual payments of $60,000. Contingent upon his cooperation with the ethics investigation I have initiated at Roberts Properties and his completion of a business ethics program at Yale University." Lucas's face had no color. "What?" he said hoarsely. "To my daughter Emma Roberts, I leave my personal residence and its contents, my personal investment portfolio, and 55% ownership of Roberts Properties." The room erupted with surprised exclamations. Uncle Thomas rose up to protest before Charles forcefully directed him back to his seat. On TV, Dad remained calm during the chaos. Emma's artistic vision and ethical foundation make her the ideal person to guide Roberts Properties into the future. She may choose to take an active role in management or to serve as chairperson of the board while continuing her artistic career. That will be her decision. I was having difficulty breathing. This cannot be happening. After years of feeling Dad had rejected my decisions, he was not only confirming them, but also entrusting me with his life's work. The remaining 45% of company shares will be distributed among the current board members and senior management with specific allocations detailed in the written will, the father stated. I've also established a foundation in my name to support arts education in Boston, which will be directed by Emma. Dad stared straight into the camera again. I know this comes as a shock to everyone, particularly to Lucas. Son, I hope that in time you will understand that this decision comes from love. Love for you, for Emma, and for the company that bears our name. The path you've been on leads nowhere good. My hope is that these provisions will guide you back to the values I try to instill in you." Lucas rose abruptly, knocking his chair aside. "This is insane. He was manipulated. I'll contest this." "I anticipated that reaction," Dad remarked, almost as if in response to Lucas's scream. "Charles has comprehensive documentation of everything the investigation uncovered, including recorded conversations, falsified documents, and financial records. Contesting the will would only result in making this information public, possibly leading to criminal charges." Lucas became quiet, his face a mask of rage and astonishment. "Emma," Dad said again, his voice softening. "I know this is an enormous responsibility that you never asked for. If you choose to sell your shares or to take a different path entirely, I've included provisions for that as well, but I hope you'll consider accepting this role. Robert's properties could greatly benefit from your new perspective and ethical foundation." Dad paused, emotion returning to his face. "More than anything, I wish we'd had the chance to reconcile in person. To go fishing again. To talk about your art. To rebuild what was broken. I'm so deeply sorry that won't happen now." Tears streamed down my cheeks around the table. Even those who had been coldest to me became uneasy and avoided my gaze. "I'll conclude with this," Dad remarked. "Family is complicated. Business is complicated, but integrity should never be complicated. It's either there, or it isn't. Emma never lost hers, even when it would have been easier to compromise. That's why, in the end, she is the right person to carry on the Roberts legacy." Dad grinned, a real loving smile I hadn't seen in years. "I love you both, Lucas and Emma. I hope this decision leads to healing, to growth, and ultimately to a stronger family and company. Thank you all for listening." The light went off. For a while, no one talked or moved. Lucas's raucous chuckle pierced the stillness. "You think this changes anything?" he continued, looking at me. "You know nothing about running a real estate company. The board will never accept you." He looked around the table for support, but the board members were deliberately avoiding his stare. Charles cleared his throat. "Perhaps this would be a good time to take a brief recess before we continue with the formal reading of the written will. There are additional documents and evidence that Mr. Roberts instructed me to share regarding the investigation he mentioned." Lucas stormed away without saying another word. The majority of the others followed, mumbling among themselves and throwing uneasy glances in my direction. Only Charles remained, painstakingly organizing his files. "Did you know?" I inquired gently. "About all of this?" Charles nodded. "Your father confided in me after he made his discovery. He was heartbroken about the time he'd lost with you." He stopped, looking at me with kindness. "He was very proud of you, Emma. He kept a portfolio of articles about your exhibitions in his desk drawer. The real one, not the one Lucas controlled." The tears returned, but they were different this time. Tears of sadness blended with a deep feeling of vindication and missed opportunity. "I wish I'd known. I wish we'd had more time." "So did he," Charles said kindly. "But he also thought you have the strength to manage this duty. He would not have left you the firm otherwise." As the others returned for the remainder of the proceedings, I sat straight in my chair, wiping away my tears. The route ahead would be difficult. A company to learn, a brother to deal with, and a heritage to uphold. But for the first time in years, I felt my father's love and acceptance. Not in spite of my decisions, but because of them. And that made all the difference. The days after the will reading were a flurry of meetings, legal briefs, and emotional processing. Lucas, true to his temperament, promptly engaged an attorney to challenge the will. But Charles was prepared. My father's proof was thorough and devastating. After a brief but intensive court struggle, Lucas dropped his appeal and accepted the provisions, as specified. I had not seen or spoken with him since he stormed out of the conference room. Charles informed me that Lucas had moved out of Dad's house, which is now my residence, and had gone on an extended trip overseas. I couldn't help but feel a complex combination of rage, pity, and a strong familial tie. Regardless of what he'd done, he was still my brother, the small child who used to build sandcastles with me on Cape Cod beaches. My first significant choice was whether to go back to Boston or try to run the business remotely from New York. After careful deliberation and talks with Charles and the board, I agreed to return temporarily, at least until I gained a better understanding of the business and developed a management structure I could trust. The company's transformation was not flawless. Several long-standing Lucas workers quit. Others questioned my leadership, wondering how an artist could ever understand real estate development. I confronted these obstacles full on, tackling the business with the same zeal that I had devoted to my creative career. I'm not pretending to be an expert in real estate, I told the gathering staff at my first company-wide meeting. But I know my father's values, and I know mine. His properties will be run with integrity, creativity, and respect for everyone who works here. I surrounded myself with skilled advisors, spent countless hours studying the business, and gradually earned the respect of the firm. I also started a complete ethics evaluation of all current initiatives, making appropriate revisions even if they affected the bottom line. The Broadway Avenue project, which Lucas boasted about at the burial, required extensive adjustments when we identified many safety shortcuts. The added expenses reduced revenues, but the finished edifice was something we could all be proud of. At the ribbon-cutting event 6 months after Dad's passing, I felt his presence vividly, applauding the difficult but correct decisions. Family members slowly began to reach out. The first was my cousin Sophia, who called tentatively one afternoon. "I owe you an apology," she replied without explanation. "I believe Lucas's version of things without ever asking for yours." "That wasn't fair." "No, it wasn't," I said, not making things easy for her. Years of judgment and isolation could not be reversed with a single phone call. "I understand if you don't want to speak to me," Sophia said. "But I'd like a chance to rebuild our relationship if you're willing." I thought about her plea. "I'm open to that, but it will take time. And I need you to understand that I never abandoned Dad. I never stopped caring about this family." "I know that now," she responded calmly. "We all do." Similar talks ensued. With Uncle Thomas, Aunt Lillian, and other extended family members. Some were sincere in their regret. Others seemed more concerned with keeping ties to the family company than with real reconciliation. I embraced the former while keeping appropriate boundaries with the latter. One of my most noteworthy discoveries occurred when I eventually moved into Dad's house. In his study, behind a fake panel in the bookshelf that reminded me of childhood treasure hunts, I discovered a collection of my artwork. Not only did he buy the paintings anonymously, but he also kept photos of my student work, newspaper cuttings from shows, and even a framed replica of my art school graduation. Along with these riches was a leather-bound diary. Opening it with shaky hands, I saw writings spanning years, recording Dad's opinions on the business, Lucas, and myself. The early entries revealed his displeasure with my professional decision. But as time progressed, his tone shifted. "Saw Emma's new exhibition online today," he wrote, 2 years before his death. "Her work is getting attention from serious critics. There's a depth to her paintings that reminds me of how she used to see the world as a child, always noticing things the rest of us missed. I wish I could tell her how proud I am, but the distance between us now feels unbridgeable. Lucas says she doesn't return his calls either. I wonder if she's truly moved on from this family." Later posts became more inquisitive, revealing the first seeds of doubt regarding Lucas's story. The final postings detailed his horrifying revelations and commitment to set things right. "The private investigator confirmed my worst fears today," he wrote, 3 months before his death. "Lucas has been systematically keeping Emma away from me, intercepting our communications for years. How could I have been so blind? My son has betrayed not only his sister but the core values I thought I'd instilled in him. I need to fix this. To contact Emma personally, tell her the truth, and ask for her forgiveness. I am planning a vacation to New York next month. I only hope it is not too late to fix what has been broken." I am in tears as I read his final entry. Dated only a few days before his heart attack. "Made plans for New York. I haven't felt this hopeful in years. Also met with Charles to discuss revising my will. If something occurs before we can reconcile in person, Emma will at least know the truth. At the very least, she'll know I loved her and admired her bravery and integrity. Lucas' deeds must have repercussions. Though it aches my heart to put them into action, I can only hope that one day both of my children will return to the principles that are most important. These revelations helped me begin to heal, to forgive both my father and myself for the years we had lost. I couldn't alter the past, but I could respect his legacy by running the firm with the integrity he valued, as well as fostering my creative vision while taking on this new duty." 6 months after taking over Roberts Properties, I established the Robert Roberts Foundation for Arts Education, which uses corporate earnings to support arts programs in Boston's needy schools. For the Foundation's debut exhibition, I showcased my new series of paintings inspired by my childhood fishing expeditions, alongside a carefully chosen selection of promising local artists. The exhibition opening was widely attended by both the art and business communities. As I stood in front of the audience, I felt a sense of connection between these two elements of my life that had previously appeared incompatible. I informed the gathering visitors that my father had given me 2 vital things. First, integrity is not negotiable. Second, Taking a step back and observing things from a new angle might provide the most beneficial viewpoint. This is what art does for us. It challenges us to perceive the world in new ways. The Robert Roberts Foundation seeks to pass on that gift to future generations. After the remarks, while attendees mingled and looked at the artwork, Charles approached me with a soft grin. "Your father would be incredibly proud," he added, taking in the show. "You've managed to honor both his legacy and your own vision. Not many people could navigate that balance so gracefully." "I wish he could see it," I said, the old agony of loss intensifying. "In some ways, I think he did see it," Charles reflected. "He recognized your potential long before any of us. That's why he made the choice he did." The next morning, I went to Dad's grave for the first time since his burial, bringing a small arrangement of wildflowers and sitting alongside the gravestone in the peaceful cemetery. "I'm trying to do right by you, Dad," I murmured gently. "The business is going well. We have just started the foundation. I believe you would approve of the adjustments we've made." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "I discovered your notebook. I understand you wanted to reconcile. I wish we'd had that chance. But knowing you were proud of me, that you understood, it means everything." I told him about the business, my art, the challenge and unexpected satisfaction of bringing these worlds together, and as I spoke, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, as if something broken had been mended. "I haven't heard from Lucas," I said. "But Charles thinks he's in Europe somewhere. I hope that eventually we can find a path ahead, but I'm not holding my breath. Some wounds take longer to heal than others." Before departing, I rested my palm on the chilly granite of the headstone. "I love you, Dad. Thank you for believing in me even when I had no idea you did. I'll do my best to make you proud every day." Life continues to be a complicated mix of corporate leadership and artistic endeavor. Some days I feel burdened by the multiple obligations, wondering whether I can genuinely do honor to both, while others provide unexpected moments of clarity and purpose, confirming that I'm on the right track. Through all of this, I've learned that family relationships are rarely simple. They're shaped by misunderstandings, stories we tell ourselves and each other, and opportunities taken and missed. My father and I lost years we'll never get back, but in the end, truth prevailed. His final act gave me something far more valuable than a business empire: the knowledge that he saw me, truly saw me, and loved me for who I am. Have you ever had a time when the truth finally came out after years of misunderstanding? How did it affect your outlook on your relationships?